Welcome to Hey Soul Sista, the podcast for women ready to embrace greater joy, freedom, and a soulful life. And if you enjoyed this episode, please remember to subscribe, follow, like, and share. Hey Soul Sisters, today's conversation is a powerful one because my guest is Tabitha Acret. She's a mother, academic, and advocate, and a woman who has turned unimaginable grief into a fight for change. In 2022, Tabitha's daughter Mackenzie was brutally murdered by her former partner in an act of domestic violence, an attack that happened in front of Mackenzie's young son. And what followed was not only the devastating loss of her daughter, but a long and difficult journey through the justice system. And since then, Tabitha has become one of Australia's most powerful voices, advocating for stronger laws and protections for women and children. This conversation is raw, courageous, and deeply important. We talk about Mackenzie, who she was as a person, the moment Tabitha's world changed forever, and how she's turned grief into advocacy to make sure other families don't experience the same tragedy. Now, International Women's Day was only 2 days ago, and this conversation is a reminder of why the fight to end violence against women matters. And I also want to let you know that this episode discusses domestic and family violence and homicide. So please take care while listening, and it's totally fine if you need to stop and walk away for a while or come back later and continue listening. Tabitha, thanks so much for coming on Hey Soul Sista.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I know what a busy woman you are.
It's been a busy week already. It's Monday and I'm like, is it Friday yet?
And we were just chatting. You're a dental lecturer at Sydney University.
Yes. So I've been there as a permanent academic since 2023. I worked as a casual academic there since 2017. So I still work clinically. I work in specialist perio practice, which means I treat people with gum disease, which is kind of it's going to sound really weird to non-dental people. My passion is dental disease. And that's what I lecture at Sydney Uni, all about gum disease. It's what I did my master's in research in, and it's what I continue to research as well. And then teaching new students, and, you know, they're Bachelor of Oral Health students, so they go on to be oral health therapists. And yeah, I love it, but it's definitely, we're about to get our new batch of students, and it's an interesting time of year. Yeah.
Well, thank you for making time, because you literally flew in in the car, but literally flew into the studio, coming straight for an award ceremony at Sydney Uni, which you won.
Yes, which was very nice. I won the Dean Citation in Excellence for Teaching this year. So very proud, because as much as, you know, there's some great roles, I love doing some of the research. You know, there's also admin work involved in being an academic, which I hate, but it is actually the teaching that I love. I love being a part of students and shaping their future career, and especially helping. I think I've got a little bit of a favoritism for some of the single mums that are studying, because that was me at one stage, and really helping them get through that degree and really change the course of their life, and how much of a difference. And education can really change outcomes for all people, men and women, but especially women. And it's something I really feel passionate about, is helping educate that next generation to have financial freedom, to have workplace choices, to be able to choose what they want to do. And some weeks I do feel overwhelmed with my life. I'm not going to lie. You know, I'm juggling my daughter's son, my son, I work, I'm studying again. I'm always studying, but yeah, I'm doing another degree, and I'm also trying to take time to look after myself, like by exercising and doing those things, and occasionally seeing friends. And it's a lot. But I feel really grateful that I actually have the ability to make the choice to make that juggle, when for many generations women didn't have that choice to feel exhausted. They just got to feel exhausted by what they were told, society told them they could do. And so some weeks when I think, God, it's a lot this week, I think, no, be really blessed that so many women fought and pounded the streets so that I could make this juggle. And it's always a constant juggle, I think, for working women, and finding that balance and what works for you and your family and your kids. And it's different for every single person. And that's what I think is even better, is that we all individually can make that choice rather than having it made for us. But when you don't have education, that choice isn't as voluntary, because you don't have the choice of how many hours you want to work or how you want to balance that. You've just got to work to survive. And so that's why I'm really passionate about especially helping women get into the workforce with good degrees and good careers so that they can have those choices in life.
I agree 100%. It's interesting, probably 4 or 5 years ago at Got Your Back Sister, which is domestic violence charity here in Newcastle that I now chair. But because of that, we were seeing so many women in poverty because of the domestic violence that they had experienced. And, you know, literally were starting their lives from nothing. And many of them either hadn't had the opportunity to finish school or had lost the confidence to be in the workforce. So we actually started doing a 16-week program to help give women vocational skills and soft skills to help them re-enter the workforce with work experience with local businesses and corporates and things as well because of that very thing.
Yeah, and it is overwhelming. I actually was making a social media post today. It's 20 years since I went back to university as a single mum to study full-time and quit my job. And it was a really overwhelming time. I cried a lot in the car. I was like, what have I done? You know, I've quit a full-time job. I wasn't making enough to really survive long-term, but I at least had money coming in, and now I'm trying to do all this stuff. But it really was one of the most challenging things that I've done, but one of the best decisions that I've made. And I've gone on now to hopefully by the end of this year complete my 5th degree. And, you know, I've done many postgraduate degrees and, you know, really changed the course of my future, something that I never actually imagined when I was just signing up just to try and get that first undergraduate done. But I really think anything is possible, but having support makes it a lot easier. And, you know, I really see an importance of supporting women to get in there and get those degrees, especially when they're trying to juggle childcare, making more flexible arrangements. But for women that have experienced domestic violence, it's about supporting them with the confidence to do it, but also making sure they're set up so they're never going to be in that financial destitute again and they can be financially independent. That's a really, really important thing. And I think that's something we need to be teaching our young girls about how important financial independence is, because that finances is held over so many women in so many situations, and it's the reason why they can't leave. It's not the reason why they don't leave. They just physically can't leave sometimes because it actually means homelessness.
Yeah.
It means that, well, where are my kids going to sleep at night? It's better that I'm unsafe instead of them being unsafe. And these are the decisions that some women are having to make, unfortunately. And I think this is what society has to realize is that, yes, on paper, we're a great country that supplies a lot of things. And if you look at us and compare us to some other countries, we have much better standards of providing a single parent's pension. But that single parent's pension hasn't been going up. And the cost of living and what that pays is not sustainable. And, you know, it outrages me when I hear people saying, oh, you know, women are having children to profiteer. If you can profiteer off that, then you're a freaking genius.
Yeah.
And you don't need it. Go be an entrepreneur. Because I don't know how you could do that. It's not a lot of money. It's not to a livable standard. And most of them cannot even find a rent place within those means because rent is so expensive. And the reality is these women are looking at living in cars at the beach in unsafe situations that put them and their children in very dangerous situations. It makes them vulnerable to predators, and it makes them more vulnerable to second and third and fourth domestic violence relationships, because the reality is that men who commit these kind of crimes, they hunt women, whether they do it subconsciously or consciously, and they are the perfect victim because they're vulnerable. You know, they're in this stage where sometimes that charm that comes at the beginning, it seems like a savior, and then it flips all of a sudden. I think that's what society doesn't realize, is that terrible people on paper can be very charismatic as well.
Absolutely.
And they can fool women into these relationships and situations. They don't, you know, become violent on the first date and women just go, oh, wow, can I date this? That's not how it works.
They hook them in with the kindness and
love bombing them, doing all these things. And when you are in really uncertain or precarious situations, and you don't even have to be in that, you can be really happy and get love bombed and still end up in these situations. It can happen to anyone, no matter what your socioeconomic status or social status is. But it does make women of certain areas more at risk, and that is just a reality.
Absolutely. And there's stories that we would hear every day at Got Your Back Sister. It's heartbreaking. But, you know, there are so many services out there that are doing their best. And Tabitha, you have been through the most horrendous 4 years. I can't even imagine. You've experienced every mother's, every parent's worst nightmare as a result of domestic violence where your precious daughter was murdered, and then have been advocating the government since then for legislation change. And we were just hearing about how busy you are and everything that you've got going on, and then you have been dealing with this as well.
I think it's not something that you ever imagine is going to happen in your life. And that's why it's really easy for some people to try and ignore the subject or think it doesn't really concern me. But what I will say is, whilst we say that, yes, some people have higher risk factors for experiencing domestic violence, at the end of the day, domestic violence has no boundaries on social status or income or where you live. We do see it in high-end suburbs, in low-end suburbs. We see it everywhere across every culture, unfortunately. We might see it in higher rates in some places, but everybody is at risk, unfortunately. And we have unfortunately experienced the worst end of that. But I think one of the biggest things that's driven the advocacy on my side is that I don't want other families to experience what we've experienced with the death and the post dealing with the justice system, the post dealing with everything that goes with that as well, has been a fairly traumatic system to deal with. And, you know, obviously I've connected with other victims and families throughout this, and unfortunately our story isn't rare or unique or anything. It is run of the mill, and that's what's really horrifying.
Yeah. How are you going now?
I think it's last year, obviously 2022 when our daughter was murdered was a very, very difficult year. And it's been difficult since, but I would say 2025 was equally as difficult. You know, getting ready for trial, sentencing, appeals, they were difficult. There were lots of ups and downs, and there was more negative than there was positive happening in that year. That's just the reality of it. And so, yeah, it's been a tough year, but I think I'm lucky. I'm just a naturally resilient person, I think.
Yeah.
And you just got to keep on going. Like, you just got to keep getting up, and you just got to keep, you know, doing what you can do. And I'm totally aware that not everyone can maybe get up and push themselves in the same way. But for me, it's something that makes me feel better, is that I'm advocating and doing things. So for me, it's kind of, I suppose, my therapy, the things that help me deal with it. For some people, it's not that, and that's completely fine. Everyone's got to do what works for them and what they can mentally cope with. But for me, I think advocacy is a way to actually process some of the things and think, well, we've got this terrible thing that happened, but if we can get something positive out of it, you know, where we help save a life or we help another family not experience this, then at least it isn't just always negative. There are some things that we were able to bring good out of this as well.
We see beautiful photos of Mackenzie and videos of Mackenzie on social media and in the media. A beautiful young girl with her whole future ahead of her, with a gorgeous little boy. What was she like as a person?
We were very different to each other in some ways and very similar in others. I think we were really similar. She was very headstrong like me, very determined. You know, if this wasn't right, she's going to tell it just like I would. No, but very different in other ways. You know, like I said, I work as an academic and researcher. I'm pretty fact heavy in life. I'm like, it's not what the research says. Pretty like, no, not that. And I, you know, I have multiple science degrees. I'm very that way. She loved crystals and, you know, charging her moon water, and she'd ask me those things. I'd be like, God, no. Like, so very different in that set. She's a vegetarian, had been since she was 13. She said just before her 13th birthday, I'm not going to eat meat again. It's not the right thing.
Ethical vegetarian.
Ethical vegetarian. She actually loved meat, like loved a steak before, or a rack of ribs before she, but she became an ethical, she loved it, but she just decided ethically she didn't want to do that. And she was probably closer to vegan towards the end as well, which I would never give up soft cheese, but she, I'm like, no, it's fine. It's fine. The bees love making this honey for me. But she definitely felt very strongly about doing the right things for the earth, being, you know, kind in that sense to animals as well. And she was always like, had a way with animals. Like, she was always even as a toddler, so gentle when she saw an animal and just loved them. She was just finishing off her qualification to be a yoga teacher. You know, she wanted to live in Byron Bay one day. very different to each other
Yeah.
in that sense. And, I always used to laugh that everything was always curated. Like, I was like, it looks perfect. Where I'm, someone that's like, I survived the day. This is what it looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and that's when I first met you.
Yeah.
Was in Byron Bay when we were up there doing I Run for Her, and purely by chance, I think through
One of Mackenzie's friends, Alice, we also did the I Run for Her day in Byron Bay.
Yes. And
that day we all, as of like family and friends, we came in and joined in. We actually do that walk every year. And so that year it was on there as well. Yeah, that's her ideal spot. So we like to go to Byron Bay at least once a year, and we go spend a weekend up there and go do the things that she would have liked to taken her son to do up there. Like we've gone to Crystal Palace, and it was actually a really fun day, even though I don't prescribe to worshipping crystals. Everyone, we had a great day. And
you can see I'm a crystal. I don't know if you think I'm a crystal girl.
And her son loves them as well. So does my son. So they had a brilliant day. And we visit her favourite beach, and we walk up to the lighthouse, and we actually always have something really nice happen when we go up there. So there's always like a rainbow and some whales singing as they go past when we get up there. So we always feel like all the stars align whenever we go to Byron, and really nice things happen. So it is really lovely to go up.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And yes, I remember we were all walking up to the lighthouse together on that particular day, and it was a beautiful day too.
Yeah, yeah.
I do recall that you were talking with Joey and I. Joey was with us from Got You Back Sister as well. And I remember you sharing with us about when you got the phone call to say that Mackenzie had been murdered. Is that something that you feel comfortable talking about now? So do you mind sharing?
Yeah, it's like obviously your world just spins. All of a sudden it's quite.
And you weren't in Newcastle?
No, it was my birthday. And I'd taken my son up to Cairns, and we were going diving off the Great Barrier Reef for my birthday. And we got the call up there. So I needed, the first thing I actually said is just, where is her son and what has happened to him and where is he right now? And all they could confirm is he was safe and they had care of him in that moment.
And that was the police.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then, it's 2:00 in the morning. I made a couple of phone calls to people. I called Lifeline. I was on hold for 30 minutes and hung up. And then because I was just looking at my son who was asleep, and I remember just thinking straight away, how do I tell him? How do I handle this? And then
because that's his big sister.
Yeah, and they were very close actually. Even though there's a big age gap, there's 12 and a half years between them. They had a very close relationship. So I was like, how am I going to tell him? I remember my best friend called me back because I'd called her, and she said, I've got a 6:00 flight to Sydney. I'll just wait in the airport till whatever time you can land. And she's like, and I'll get you home from the airport, because she lived in Adelaide. So she's like, I'll get there. I've packed a bag and I'm coming over just on a one-way. We'll see what we have to do. And I said, okay. I called Lifeline again, waited another 30 minutes, hung up. So we need more funding there. And then I decided I wouldn't tell him. So I woke him up in the morning. I had to wake him up quite early because I got us on a 6 a.m. flight out of Cairns. And I just said, we have to leave right now and we have to fly home to Newcastle. And he was like, why? Like, we were going to go do this today. And I said, yeah, Mackenzie's not well and we've got to go help out. We've got to go look after her son. He goes, oh, he always ruins everything. I'm like, yep. And then the stressful thing was it was already on the news. So I was trying to navigate him through the airport without seeing the news.
Oh, wow.
So we went to the Lego store and I just said to him, buy something that you want. And I knew that would take 30 minutes because when he's in the Lego store, he's like, oh. So I just said, buy whatever you want and I'll buy it. And he was like, what? You never say that. And I was like, just pick something. And I knew that would keep him away from the TVs. And then we got on the plane and I remember I just silently cried the whole flight, but I couldn't tell him what had happened because I thought he needs to be in a safe space when I share this information with him. And I think, yeah, like my brain just kicked into survival from that second. And I knew from that second that our whole lives have changed completely. But from that second, I had to protect him and my daughter's son as much as possible. And as much as this is a defining moment in all of our lives, and I'll never be the same person again, I don't want the potential for my child and my daughter's child to not be reached because of this moment. And I don't want it to be the defining moment of their whole life. And to make something not the defining moment of your whole life, you have to actively make a decision to make that. So you have to work at that really hard, and you have to do that from minute one.
Yeah.
And so I remember when we landed in Sydney, he did say to me, "Why is Auntie Cheryl here? This is weird." And because that was like she visits a lot, but it was weird that she was standing in the airport just at the gate waiting for me. And then we got in the car and he's like, "Why are you coming to our house?" And we were like,
do you think he knew that?
He was just like, something's wrong. And I said, "She's just going to come visit for the weekend." He was like, "Oh, okay." So then we drove the 2 hours home, played I Spy, did things to try and just keep him as distracted as possible. And then when we got into the house, he could instantly know there was something wrong because it was full. There's people there. They're helping with the baby. Do you know what I mean? Like,
so by then the baby's
yeah. And so then the neighbours were there. Food is turning up. People are like starting to come over. And the hard thing is by the time we got in the door, there's a 2 hour difference. There's an hour difference back then because it was daylight savings. So it was 7 o'clock when we were landing. You got 2.5. So it was like after lunch by the time we walked in the door. Unfortunately, I'd been on a plane. I hadn't been able to call a lot of people. And then we had people calling us with, "We've just seen the news. Is this true? Is this true?" And the horrible thing is that it's a really horrible way for close friends and family to find this information out on social media, on the news, and I just couldn't control it. It's something I've kind of tried to fight for, to bring in a banning of saying a murdered person's name for the first 24 hours. I haven't been successful with that, but it's something I do feel passionate about because I'm not the only family that it's experienced family members finding out like this, and it's not a nice way to find out, and people aren't in safe places when they hear, like when I was texting people that morning saying, "I need to speak to you today. Can you tell me when you're going to be home? And it's a good time to chat," because it's not the thing that you tell someone when they're driving down the freeway at 120 Ks. You're going to kill someone doing that. And these are the things that are going through your mind. Like, how do I give this information to someone but protect them the best way that I can as I give it? Because it's not information you want to have to do. It's a really horrible experience to have to ring someone and tell them this information. And so you've got to keep them as safe as you can when you do it. And that's really hard when that's taken out of your control, and having to explain that to your child, what's happened, in a way that's appropriate and they can understand but not too much information, is really difficult. And then you've got your daughter's son thrusted in, very traumatized, and you're trying to manage that. And it's a really, really difficult time. You've got the media knocking on your front door. Police are coming in and out of the house. Nothing is normal. And trying to create normal space and routine for the kids to help them is kind of impossible.
Her ex-partner, who showed up that night and murdered her in front of her little son, was he apprehended straight away, do you know?
Yeah, at the scene.
At the scene.
Yeah,
He was still there.
So she had called the police that he'd broken in and he had a knife. And they were there in minutes, and in that time he'd stabbed her 78 times. So he was also injured, but injuries from the knife slipping in his hand. So when they got there, he was very concerned about his wound, and they've got the audio because the police are wearing body cam. And, he's yelling, "What about me? What about me?" when they were trying to render assistance to her. "I'm injured. No one cares about me." Yeah. So, no remorse.
No remorse.
No. And there was no remorse through any of the 3.5 years that we dealt with him afterwards. But, yeah, very much. So he didn't have time to leave the scene is what I would suspect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, I kind of heard bits and pieces through the media. I actually had a journalist call me that weekend. Yeah. I was away with my husband, and a journalist called me, and I hadn't heard anything. Yeah. Like, we were up the coast. And I just kind of said, "Look, I don't know anything." And the next few days or next week or so, I was like jumped online to find out what had gone on. And we were talking about it at Got Your Back Sister. And I remember we were just outraged that he was out on parole.
Yeah. And it's even worse than that. He had gone to jail for quite a vicious assault on her, and he got 9 months, and he only served 4 months for good behaviour, which I have a problem with. And then he committed domestic violence the day he was released against his father, went back to court and was out on bail for that. But he should have actually gone back to jail because he committed a crime while on probation. I have to allegedly say he committed a sexual assault against somebody else. It's going to court. He's just fired his lawyer. That 4 years later, they still haven't made it to court for that sexual assault. And this is another issue with the, she's ready to give up, and this is the issue. Yeah. He's going to get away with another crime which doesn't go on his, rap sheet, because he knows the tactic that if I fire the lawyer the week before court, the new lawyer doesn't have time. And he's been able to delay court for 4 years.
It's just wrong.
And then you just do that until you break the victim.
Yeah. It's just wrong.
Yeah. And we just watched it. And he did it with us. He fired his lawyer more than 6 times in our case, delayed so many dates. Even when we were at sentencing, he fired his lawyer 20 minutes after my victim impact statement. We all got sent home that day.
I actually wondered why it took years for him to be held to account and to go to court. Yeah.
It does take a long time in general. It'll take them about 6 months to prepare the brief. And they're not fast with murder cases because the suspect's usually in jail. So they're like, they're going to be spending a long time. It's okay. Where someone that might be spending a short sentence, they push them to the court system first because they don't want them to potentially spend more time in jail than they would have for the sentence. So they do that, but ours took longer than it should have. Really, the average is 2 years. Ours took 3.5, and that was because he just fired lawyer after lawyer and just misbehaved so poorly that it added extra time. And again, it's another way of using control. It's another way of punishing the victim and their family further, and they're allowed to do it. And I have a personal problem with it because the government, we all paid for his defence.
Yeah.
He had legal aid lawyers until legal aid started paying a private lawyer for him. And, I think there should be a rule of, I totally get that, all right, you're having a problem with one lawyer, but 6, there has to be 3, all right, you fired 3, suck it up now, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah.
When do we just say no more?
Yeah.
No more abusing the system. But we give the offender a lot of control and we give victims 0.
Similarly, in domestic violence cases where there isn't murder involved and, victims are there in front of their abusers in the court system, that's
and they do the same thing.
Yeah.
They just will delay that actual hearing until someone says, God, I give up.
Yeah.
And it's a tactic that works. And so they use it again and again and again and again.
Yeah. Before you saw him in court, did you get an opportunity to just front him?
No, and we never spoke to him in court. No, you're not allowed to.
Yeah. Would you just want to scream and go, you fucking asshole, you fucking took my daughter away?
I think you could see, I thought my brother might do that actually. That day I was like, shh, just sit down. I think there's many things at play. You kind of feel like in disbelief when you're looking at them.
Yeah.
I actually didn't look at him a lot. I didn't make a lot of eye contact and I looked at the judge a lot. But we would have been thrown out of court. We would have got in trouble.
Yeah.
There's rules that you've got to stick with.
Yeah.
And whilst he can play up and, has had to be shackled in court, which isn't normal because he couldn't behave and could assault people and do all terrible things, we are not afforded the same freedoms. So,
yeah. I've always wondered the magistrate that let him out and didn't put him when he assaulted his father and he didn't put him back in jail for breaching his parole terms. I've always wondered if that magistrate feels any remorse himself.
Well, one of the things that really annoys me is judges have no ramifications for anything they do. They cannot get in trouble.
They're like gods.
They are gods that cannot get in trouble, and there is no ramifications to him for what he does, which I find quite interesting because for me, working for a university, if I made a really bad decision, I could lose my job.
Yeah.
There would definitely be some sort of ramification in the workplace for me. Police officers have ramifications all the time for things that they do. Lawyers can get in trouble in court quite regularly. You know, you spoke out of turn, you did this, you didn't do this right.
You could get in trouble for speaking out in court.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But judges are a law unto their own. And we were also told quite firmly when we didn't have the outcome that we wanted, and I was pretty ropeable with that judge, I was told, judges stick together, be quiet or you won't get your appeal. And I was like, okay. So, you know, like they have a lot of power, and lawyers don't want to work against them because then they will be ostracized. And, you know, like there is a lot of bullying that goes on there that isn't really spoken about. And it's a pretty unjust system in some ways. And what we found out from the justice system is there's not much justice in the justice system.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. How long did the court case actually go for?
So we were preparing for trial. It was pretty stressful leading up to it. I was quite anxious because I knew that they were going to play the body cam footage of her passing away in court. There was going to be some quite violent scenes to see, and I was getting very anxious. But also I knew that once those things played in court, they became public property and they could be played on the news and my kids could Google it.
Could be on YouTube.
Yeah, like so I was getting very stressed. And then it was 5 days before going to trial, he said, I want to negotiate. So he had been claiming self-defense for 3.5 years, which was just insulting. They came to me when we were 1 month after the death and said he wants to negotiate. He wants a manslaughter charge. And I said, there will be nothing that I will negotiate manslaughter with you. I said, so don't bring the offer to the table again. It's not for discussion. I will not negotiate with that. This is not manslaughter. And also the time for that will be ridiculous. This is murder and nothing else. Like I've got nothing else to talk about. And my lawyer was like, I 100% agree. Like, great. I was hoping you'd say that. So then he was claiming self-defense, mental health, self-defense, mental health, self-defense. He knew that would happen. I think getting close to the trial, he realised that it was going to be hard to go with the self-defense.
Yeah.
So then he said, I want to plead guilty. Gets him a 10% reduction. He could have got a 25% reduction, which I don't agree with if he did it early, so I'm kind of glad he didn't. So 1 week before trial, after all our friends and family had taken a month off work, we'd all rearranged our lives, he goes, let's negotiate. Very luckily for us, the judge said, fine, if I accept it, he'll accept it. So I said, yes, I'd accept the guilty plea. And then my lawyer said, we might not have sentencing for another couple of months, or he may say we'll do sentencing. And what he did say is, we're going to do sentencing in the time that we had for trial. Let's just get this done because this is ridiculous how long it's gone for. So we had it in the last week of what the trial would have been. We actually should have been 1 to 2 days. It went for 5 because he fired his lawyers. He played up. There were problems. So, and then we had the sentence on the last day. So on the last day, you just go in. The judge, I'd have to say, it was a nightmare. He invited the media in, and it was quite obvious that he just wanted to be on camera. For 2.5 hours, he read out in horrific detail things about the crime scene that we didn't even know, things about the night. We might as well have watched the video, to be honest.
Yeah.
And he had no need to do it. We don't know. When he was doing it.
He wanted his moment in the spotlight.
Yeah. When he was doing it, I remember thinking, is this because he's going to give like the most amazing sentence? Like he's going to make an example out of this guy. So when I was sitting there and just watching my friends and family have tears roll down their eyes as they're hearing this information, and he's causing so much trauma. There was nothing trauma-informed about that day. He was causing so much trauma in the room. I'm just watching everyone just in tears and not coping. I was crying. We're finding out new information. I really thought, we're going to hear 30 plus years. This is what's going to happen. I'm going to suck it up and live through this because we're going to get this. And then when he read 0 for the AVO breaches, there were 8, I thought, what the hell? And I was like, okay, we're going to get a sentence. And then he said 22 years at the top, which I thought, this is crap, but maybe it's going to be 20 at the bottom. And then when he said 15, I actually turned to my brother and said, and I
Yeah.
And I stood up and I walked out. I didn't listen to the rest of what he had to say. I just had to remove myself from the room. I actually collapsed outside. So I fainted. I just couldn't keep it because I was just in so much shock, and it was just so overwhelming. I just couldn't believe, because before that morning, I had people at my house. I had 3 of my best friends came and stayed with me for the whole time. They said to me, what's going to be unacceptable? I said, anything under 20 years, and I'm going to kick off. Like I said, I will be out the front of that courthouse saying this is unacceptable. And when we got to 15, everyone was like, so, you know, all our friends and family were in so much shock. And, you know, my lawyers were fantastic. They were crying. The police were in shock. When that judge was reading those details, not only was my family crying, but the court staff were crying. We're looking around and the court staff are crying. The police in the room are crying. The guards are crying. And I'm like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this?
Okay, how does he justify that to himself now?
And there's no one to complain to. There's nothing to do about that. That's just, oh, well. And like, same as little details like he was afforded the use of his name every time he was spoken about. And my daughter was only ever called the deceased. She never had a name. You know, like the things like that, like it's, and, you know, the victim impact statement, my victim impact statement was rejected a couple of times because I wasn't allowed to say things like I said in it, you know, my daughter's son had to experience 2 years of horrific violence. They're like, well, what proof do you have of that? I was like, yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah. So we are not allowed to make a recommendation of what we think should happen. That's not allowed. But on the second day when we came back after he'd fired his lawyers, we all had to go home. He presented a letter to the court that did not have to be checked by anyone, where he victim blamed my daughter and said, you know, they had a toxic relationship and she was toxic towards him and she really pushed him. And he rejects what I say about the long-term mental health aspects for her son that I'm worried about. And when he gets out, he'll have a beer with him one day and explain the situation.
You're fucking kidding me?
And that's what we have to sit through.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And, but, you know, so it's always about the offender.
And is that the whole system or is that just this particular judge?
I think this judge was particularly bad, but it is the system in general. You know, we only just lost good character references. Now, we didn't experience that because he couldn't find anyone to give him a good character reference, but other people can. And, you know, this is, you know, in the last couple of weeks that we took away good character references for cases like this, but he literally was legally allowed to bring in a good character reference of why he shouldn't get that long. He just could not get one because he did not have a good character and has a long history of violence.
He assaulted his own father.
Yeah, he has a long history of violence as under 18, post 18, all of it. So he couldn't get one, but he technically could have done that if he wanted to. What he was allowed to do was use that. Unfortunately for him, he did have a very violent childhood, and it's very clear that he was failed as a child, and that can't be disputed, and I do believe that. But that was used as why he got his sentence reduced so much. But what I would say is you then repeated that for my daughter's son, and he actually has had a worse childhood than you had because you didn't watch someone be murdered in front of you. So therefore, sorry, you get nothing for that shitty childhood because you've now created a terrible childhood for someone else. I think they might negate each other now. Like the trauma to my daughter's son who wasn't recognised as a victim wasn't brought in, or the trauma to all of us. It was just about him and his trauma and why he got there, which I understand on an academic level, but then I also don't understand why then the rest of it, encompassing that, is not actually brought into that argument and those decisions.
Yeah. I've heard you talk about that before, actually, about the impact on her son, that's not really been taken into account at all.
No, and that's definitely something that I want to work on over the next however long it takes. I'd really like to say that not years, but we'll see what happens. But when I presented my policy document to the Premier and other ministers and asked them to talk about it in Parliament, I had a very comprehensive document. It was like 150 pages on different things that I wanted. And obviously minimum mandatory sentencing was one of them, which we were able to succeed with. But one of the others was that we legally recognise children as victims. And so I'm currently working on a new draft for that, where I'll put a new petition that will go straight to Parliament, so it has to be debated. Because even though we got 110,000 signatures around Australia with people saying they think children should be recognised as victims, it hasn't been taken on by anyone as a serious subject to want to actually make that law change. So therefore, I'm going to have to get this one debated in Parliament, which is a different petition system. I'll have to lodge that through the parliamentary page. But that's definitely what the plan is, to work over the next couple of months to get that together, to try and get people to sign that, to get those 20,000 signatures so that we can get this debated in Parliament and then make those next steps.
So that's what happened next after you heard the sentence, the really light sentence for Tyrone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mackenzie's murderer. So you then were on a mission to
Yes.
get this legislation changed. Yeah.
So, well, I remember the sergeant that worked with us, who was wonderful and looked after us really well over those 3.5 years, he said to me when I was still on the ground trying to get it together to get back up again because I'd passed out and I'd gone into shock, so I was really cold and they were like trying to heat me up and get me some food. He's like, we're going to call an ambulance. I'm just going to take you up to hospital for a little bit. I said, oh, that will not be happening. And then he said, okay, we're going to take you out the back door. We'll put you in a police car and we're going to drive you home because the media are all out the front. He said, and I said, that also won't be happening. And he said, what? And I said, I have 5 minutes to control the narrative. I said, I know what they're going to write. 22 years, it's amazing. And I Googled it before I walked downstairs and they had already said that. So I said, I'm going to control the narrative right now. I'm going to walk out. I'm going to ask for an appeal on national television. So I went and I did that. And then we went home and I started emailing and texting every journalist I knew. Because obviously in the 3 years, a lot of journalists had contacted me. So I was just going through my contacts. And I'm not someone that says people's first and last names. You get your first name and then your last name is a description of how I know you.
Yeah.
That's like, you're in my phone as Mel, got your back, sister, because I'm not good with last names. But it was easy for me because I was like Channel 9, Channel 7, ABC. It would be like Tiffany, ABC. And I'm like, excellent, text this one.
Yeah.
Channel 9, Today's Show, this one. So I just started texting and emailing every journalist I'd ever come into contact with and said to them, I'm outraged. I need you to write about this. I need you to help me with this. I need this. And so I did a couple of interviews, really lovely. Carl Stefanovic, producer, got in contact with me and said, Carl watched the news tonight. He's outraged. Do you want to come on the Today Show tomorrow morning? And so then I got on the Today Show, which is a huge platform. And then I was emailing premiers and ministers and local politicians and anyone that would listen. And Premier Minns, who's been absolutely amazing to my family and to me personally, actually replied and said, come into the office. So I was in there within a couple of days and, I was like unhappy. And so they said, so then we found out within 2 weeks that we won the right for an appeal, because the way an appeal works is the offender has an automatic right to appeal. The victims do not. And it has to be weighed up whether it's financially worth it.
Yeah.
And whether they want to. So we won the right to appeal. It's interesting because the Attorney General made a phone call to the DPP, the Premier made a phone call to the DPP. We had a lot of media and they said, the DPP cannot be influenced. We made this decision ourselves. Like, okay, whatever. But
yeah, sure.
I think it did.
Yeah.
But, I was lucky that the media really helped me. But I think I did in 5 days, 37 interviews. And anyone that would listen to me, I was like, outrageous. We need an appeal. We need an appeal. So we won that appeal pretty quickly. We waited a little bit to actually go and, have the appeal. And then we waited. I think we must have had that in July, because in the August we got the outcome, because I had to defend my dissertation the night that we got the outcome, and I cried through my dissertation. I think I only passed because I just burst into tears at the end of it and went, I've had a really bad day, because we obviously found out that we'd lost the appeal. And the way you find out that you've lost an appeal is you go into a courtroom and they just say, appeal, lost, over.
Really?
You leave. In 30 minutes, they give you a document and say you can read and figure out why.
What did it say? Why?
When we were like, oh my God. So I fronted the media again and said, outraged. I'll need to read this document. I'll get back to you all.
Yeah.
So I read the document and it really was a lot of legal jargon. So I met my lawyer the next day and they explained the document a bit better to me. And what Justice Bell actually said, because I was pretty cranky with him the first day and I felt a bit better, was he actually agreed that the sentence wasn't appropriate, that it was lighter than what it should be. But the reason why he couldn't change the appeal was it reflected normal sentencing and there was no reason to go outside of it. And so I said to the lawyer, so I'm going to translate it into everyday speak. I said, we've always sentenced shit, so we're always going to sentence shit. And she goes, she's much more polite than me. And I was like, yes. And I was like, yes.
You got nothing to lose here.
Yeah. And so I was like, all right. So this is when I realized legislation has to happen. So I text Sarah Albo from the Today Show because she'd given me a phone number, and I was like, oh. And the time that I met Premier Minns, he'd unfortunately also given me his phone number. So I was like, well, I'm going to text him.
Yeah.
And so I started texting. They had me on the Today Show the next day. And that night I went home and I thought, well, what am I going to do? So I lodged a complaint to the Human Rights Commission about unfair discriminative sentencing across New South Wales. I started writing the document. I went on the Today Show and said, all right, we're going to need and I launched the petition. And I said, oh, well, we'll have to change legislation. And I knew that legislation would never help me. It was not going to change our sentence, because some people are like, does this mean we can appeal and get a better? No, like, we're done. The end of the road is completely finished for me in our case. There's nothing I can do. When my fight picks back up again is when he hits the parole time at 15 years, and I'll have to fight to keep him there. So I now have, a 10-year break for dealing with him. But I didn't want this to keep happening. So that's when I met with the Premier. I gave him the document. I did all that stuff. And then about 2 weeks later, they rang me from his office and said, we want to talk to you about something. And I said, what? And we talked about it in Parliament. No need to debate in Parliament. We're going to change the legislation. We're just going to do it. Can you come in tomorrow and announce it with us? And I was like, what?
Yeah.
What? So we did that. And
I didn't know who they were dealing with.
Yeah, I did say to him, I'm like a cockroach. I will not go away.
And you're an academic.
Yeah,
as well. Like the whole academic talk. And
so we did that. And we've seen NT only a couple of weeks ago followed suit. So I was really proud even of that NT moment. I didn't call anyone in the NT. I had nothing to do with it. But I think it has that domino effect. If one state does it, God, we better join in. Like we've seen with coercive control coming across the country, stuff like that. Yeah. We've seen this good character reference from Harrison, the great advocacy that he's been doing. And we've seen that Queensland and New South Wales now, and we'll see that to continue across those states as well. So it's fantastic. So I'm hoping that we see this legislation change across states. But, this is a very small piece of the puzzle. I don't really want to be known as the long-term advocacy work that I do in the aftermath. I'd rather be known for work that I'm doing in prevention. Yeah. But this is also a really important piece of the puzzle. If we look at preventing domestic violence as primary, secondary and tertiary prevention, and what that means is if we want to primary prevent something, we want to prevent that before the action. That is your most important part of prevention. Secondary prevention is the incident has happened and we want to prevent it from happening again. That is also a really important piece of the puzzle. I would love that all we did was primary prevention, but the reality is it can't be. Tertiary prevention is actually looking at how we punish, and punishment actually does come under the prevention umbrella as well, because it acts as a deterrent. Yep. At the moment, it's not that much of a deterrent. I actually had a family member say to me, now I promise you they're not really going to go do it, but when they got 15 years, he goes, well, if I kill him, can I get 15 years? Because it doesn't seem that bad. Do you know what I mean? It's 15 years isn't that a deterrent. If you're getting 25, 30, 40 years, that is a deterrent. Will it stop everyone? No. But I can tell you right now, I don't text on my phone because I don't want to get a 5-point fine. Do you know what I mean? And I really make sure that if I'm having lunch with the girls, I'll go, just one, I don't want to get busted drink driving. Do you know what I mean? Because I don't even want to be close to the limit, because laws are something that I'm someone that's like, God, no, I'm not going to break the law. It is a deterrent for some people, not for everyone. Some people are still going to be terrible, terrible people no matter what. But it doesn't mean that we don't make laws. Yeah.
Absolutely. You're amazing. You really are. And, on behalf of women and Australians, thank you.
I just think
Thank you.
Some people say to me, how do you do it? And I'm like, well, I didn't get a choice. You just have to get up and you just have to do it. But we can turn away and say, not my problem. Or I can easily say, well, we've had the worst, I won't keep going. But then nothing changes, right?
Yeah.
If nothing changes, nothing changes. So it's really important that we all speak up. We're going to do it in different capacities and different abilities. And, I don't expect the single mum who's struggling, working a 50-hour week and feeding her kids to be out there having to do all the advocacy work. They've just survived, but have conversations.
Yeah.
Repost things on social media like that, raise your kids in a way to know this isn't acceptable. There's really important pieces of this puzzle, and part of primary prevention is the way we talk to our kids and explain things to our kids, and the way we have conversations with people, and the way we don't ignore things. And again, I understand it's not always safe to speak up in every situation, but where it is safe and you feel the safety to do so, it's really, really important to speak up about that.
And it's interesting. My hubby and I were just talking about this the other day and talking about men speaking up and the importance of the men speaking up and holding other men to account and how that's really difficult for some men, but it's so important because that starts to change the culture.
100%. And, you know, I've been to lots of marches before my daughter died and after my daughter died. It's not something, this is a new subject that I've become involved with after her death. You know, I've been out marching the streets and been a very proud feminist my whole life. But I very rarely see a lot of men there.
Yeah, I would agree.
It's very female heavy.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times the men that are there are my family and friends. Like, do you know what I mean?
Drag your hubby along.
Yeah, like, you know, I've got my brother there, or I've got you know, it's not seeing a lot of just random men there. You know, there are some really good ones that come along, but a lot of the times they don't see it as their problem or the thing that they need to be a part of. But if we're going to make a cultural change, they actually have to be part of that. And I don't think that women should have to fix male violence. This is actually your problem, but we're the only ones who seem to be screaming about it. And that's a huge problem there as well. So we need men to stand up and say, it's not okay.
Yeah. So Tabitha, how do you look after yourself? Because you have been living this roller coaster and also doing all your work and now raising two boys and having to deal with court cases and outcomes and sentencing, all of that, and now doing the advocacy work. How do you look after yourself?
I buy too many things online and it's the truth. Really like dresses and it's terrible. Whenever I'm stressed, I'm like, I need a new dress. Which is not a good self-care technique. I run. Yeah. So I ran the New York Marathon in 2024. I ran Berlin in 2025. I'll run Canberra, Sydney and Chicago this year. So it was a podcast. Yeah, I listened to a podcast on grief and they were talking about how running is a good way to deal with grief. And then also the guest on that podcast had lost her brother as a teenager and her husband took an overdose when they just newly separated and had small kids. So she'd had two horrific experiences of grief. And she was talking about intrinsic and extrinsic worth. And in my line of actual work, you know, I present at a lot of conferences, I do a lot of things publicly before this happened. I have a lot of extrinsic worth. And they were saying how it's really easy to lose all your extrinsic worth and how important intrinsic worth is, and that running a marathon is one of the best ways to have intrinsic worth because nobody can take it away from you. You have to do it for yourself. I hate running. Actually, I don't really even like exercising, but I like eating. I hate running, but I get up and do it because I actually am just someone that enjoys kind of achieving things.
A sense of achievement.
A sense of achievement, like, yep, can do it. Like, let's do this, set a goal, do it, set a goal, do it. And I knew if I didn't set a goal, I just wouldn't do it. And they were saying how good running is for your mental health and how good it is for grief. So I got out of the car from listening to that podcast and I rang my best friend, the same one that had flown over, and I said, I've just listened to this podcast and it'd be really good for my mental health if we ran a marathon. But I don't really want to do it by myself. And she's like, oh, God. And then I said to her, so I want to run New York. And she goes, what? I said, I want to run New York because if you're going to run a marathon, because I had a plan to do a one and done. I said, if you're going to run a marathon, make it New York, right? I said, go big or go home. And she goes, oh, God. Anyway, she's pretty used to me being a bit crazy. So the next day she sent me a text and she said, you're not going to believe this, but the New York Marathon ballot opened yesterday. And I said, oh, it's meant to be. So and then she goes, I found this Australian company that can get us tickets and we can go and buy a package. And so we purchased it. I made a post on social media and said, I'm going to run the New York Marathon because then I thought, God, it'll be so embarrassing if I don't train and do it because I've told everyone I'm going to do it. And I then said, oh, it's December. A lot of eating involved. I'll start training in January. So I set a date. This is the day the training starts. And we did this. We used Google and ChatGPT and we wrote a training plan and we did this couch to marathon.
Yeah.
And yeah, we ran the New York Marathon. And we said when we got there, what the hell were we thinking? I injured my hip running a half marathon the month before, so I hadn't even ran for 4 weeks before we did it. And we said at the beginning, we're one and done, we're one and done. And then I said to her halfway through, it'd be cool if we did another one. And then we went to dinner that night and I said, did you know that if you run all 6 majors, you get a special medal? She just goes, get out of my face. And then about an hour later, she goes, what is that medal? And I was like, we should do this. And she goes, look, we could run Berlin next year maybe. And I said, okay. So then we ran Berlin. And leading up to Berlin, she said to me, I hate you and we'll never run another marathon. I said, I hate me too and we'll never run another marathon. Because, it had been a really tough year. Training was pretty poor. And I got there and I was like, what were we thinking? And I actually cried a fair bit through that marathon. It was 30 degrees. It was really hot. People were collapsing everywhere. I wasn't as fit as I should have been. And I just remember thinking, you can do it, you can do it, you can do it. And so I burst into tears when we finally finished. I was just like, God, I survived. And then afterwards we said, maybe we could run Chicago. Here I am running.
You are superwoman. All 6 marathons. Have you done all 6 now?
No, so I've done 2 out of the 6. I run Chicago this year. The plan's to run Tokyo next year, London the year after, and then I'll just have Boston left. Boston's the hard one. You've got to qualify. You can't buy your way in like I have been. And as a tourist, you've got to really qualify. So that's what we're working on, is reducing the time. So we wiped an hour off our time in the last 12 months. So I just got to get another hour off in the next 3 years. So that's the aim. But I am goal orientated, and I think that's what advocacy work works for me.
5 degrees.
Yeah. I think advocacy work, that's what helps me, is that I see a goal. I'm going to set that goal. I'm going to do that goal. This is what I'm going to do. And I can be quite persuasive.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you can get my best friend to run now nearly her 3rd marathon, you can do anything.
Yeah. Okay, you've just totally inspired me, because I have gone back to uni to do a postgrad psychology. I've got like a business degree. I've always wanted to do psychology. So I'm like, I'm going to go do postgraduate psychology. But I decided to take this year off because I am doing a fair bit of travel this year. And I was like, I can't be 7 weeks in Europe and doing other things. And then it's funny, my hubby was like, oh, do you actually even really want to do it? And for me, it's a sense of achievement. It's something I always wanted to do. I'm going to do it. But he planted that little seed in my head. But hearing you speak, you've just inspired me. I'm like, nah, I'm going to finish that, because I'm with you, the sense of achievement.
Yeah. And that's what I've always been like that. I really like that sense of achievement, set a goal.
Yeah.
Get that. Yeah. And I don't love running. I'm never going to love it. Like, I just booked in to do a half marathon as a training run, and I'll have to go for a run when I'm finished because it won't be long enough that day. And I'll run 30 Ks that day. And they're like, what do you think about when you're running 30 Ks on a Sunday? I said, 29 Ks, 28 Ks, 27 Ks, 26 Ks. Oh God, I'm halfway. And through the whole marathon, I'm like, okay, I'm halfway. Now I've only got this. This means in my head it's this. And I just put music on, or I think about things, but I just set a goal and go, okay, well, the first goal is just do this. The second goal is just do this. The third goal is just do this.
Yeah. Which can apply to anyone and anything.
Yeah.
It's just like, break it down.
Yeah. And, you've just got to break it down into achievable steps. And sometimes even when you're doing 42.5 Ks in one day, it is just saying, I just need to make the first marker and get that drink. And then the next marker will be here. And then, you know what? I've only got 35 Ks. I can do that on a Sunday. This is a Sunday run. Oh, we're at the half marathon. Half marathon, that's a morning.
Yeah.
You just got to try and think about it in those sections. But if you're thinking it, oh God, it's 42.5 Ks, it's going to be a tough day.
Yeah. Over the last 4.5 years, have you noticed shifts in your grief?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a before an event and an after an event person, and you're never going to be the before the event person again. And that, there's nothing you can do about that. You lose some innocence, some joy that you'll never get back. I think that I allow myself a certain amount of time each day to just have a cry, be sad, and then say, now you have to put on your big girl pants and keep moving. I'm very conscious of how I grieve in front of my child and my daughter's child. I think it's important that they do see moments where you can cry, because it would be abnormal to never see you cry or to see any grief. They need to see that, but I think they need to see grief in a healthy way. So it's completely okay to have a cry in front of them occasionally. But, you know, like when we go to the beach, they might see me a little bit teary and sometimes say, oh, they're happy tears, or, you know, I just really miss her today. But I really actively promote speaking about her a lot at home in a positive way, of talking about positive memories. On her birthday, we have a cake, we sing happy birthday, we put balloons, we decorate the house like we would have. And then I give the kids presents, but I buy them presents that I think she would buy so they get really hippie stuff. And, you know, like I buy, you know, like, oh, look at this really cream outfit. But, you know, I buy them things that I think she would have got them, and we celebrate the day. So the kids actually look forward to her birthday. It doesn't mean that day is less hard for me. It's probably harder. It would be easier just to pretend like the day is not happening, to be honest. Yeah. But I'm actively trying to show positive, healthy grief to the kids, but it doesn't go away. So what I've learned is that grief and joy can coexist. So there will be moments where you don't think about the grief at all and you just have a joyful moment. But there's not many, to be honest, because every joyful moment comes with it, well, she should be here for this. So, you know, like when you're dropping her son off at his first day at school, it is a joyful moment, but there's also a lot of grief attached to something like that, because she should be doing that, not me. She should be part of this. That, you know, when you're having his birthday party and it's a really fun day, there's so much grief. So I think for him, joy with him is never very simple. Sometimes a little bit more simple for my son because, you know, his first day of high school, I wouldn't expect her to be there. Yeah. So, you know, you can enjoy that moment a little bit more simply, but it's always there. There's never a day that you don't think about what's happened. And I suppose I perpetuate that a little bit more because I have thrusted myself into an advocacy space. So I will talk about her a lot more and I'll be involved in discussions of that, so that I know that after things like today, when you're doing a podcast or you're going to speak at Parliament, I do need to have a decompress where I say, oh, it's actually okay to go home and have a nap. Where I never used to do that, but I'm like, no, I might need a 20-minute nap, or I might need to just have 20 minutes to myself. I might go have a shower and wash my hair just to have that space. But yeah, it is a complicated thing. You know, Christmas Day, there's always going to be someone missing on that day, and that day will never not have grief attached to it until the day that I don't celebrate it anymore. Do you know what I mean? That will never go away. And I think society probably, you know, I realize people kind of forget. They forget that this has happened to us. They forget that all of these things, and they're just having these normal happy days, but that will never be our life. I hope it is for the kids though. And that's what I'm actively trying to. I don't want them to forget her, but I really hope that by actively trying to healthily grieve and create healthy moments and healthy spaces and a positive space to talk about her, that Christmas isn't a day for them where they're also experiencing grief. You know, for her son, he isn't, because he doesn't understand the complexity at the moment.
Does he still remember her?
Yeah, and he asks questions and we talk about very openly with her, like, you know, and even that can be really gut-wrenching sometimes. Like he asked me the other day, do you know the address of where she is so we can send her some presents and a card? And that's a really technical thing, you know. And then he said to me, where is she? Like physically, where is she? Like after you die, where do you go? And I'm like, God, this is a question for,
That's multi-layered.
This is multi-layered. And I think it's also brought up things of like, I don't know what I think, you know, because it becomes much more complicated when you actually like, well, what does it mean? And, you know, I think that religion can be really beautiful for people and can really help them. It's not something that I'm super religious, and it hasn't been a comfort to me. It's just brought up more questions than anything. And that's something that when I'm like, well, I don't really know what I think myself. How do I explain it to you? And I've also been very open with my kids of, you can have whatever beliefs you want and they might be different to me. And that's something I've always believed in. You know, culturally, I have some beliefs from where my family have come from, and I have been brought up with some, you know, loose religion and some beliefs that my family have shaped. And I've shared them with my kids culturally, and we've partaken in certain celebrations and stuff like that outside of normal Christianity. But it's not something that I've been very strict with, or it's more like, oh, this is culturally what we do. But for my kids, I'm like, it's whatever you want it to be, or whatever, you know, if you want to do this, you want to become Buddhist, or you want to become Muslim, or you want to become Christian, I don't really care. Like, do you mean, like, as long as you don't hurt anyone in the process and it makes you happy, this is all I really care about in life. But I was like, it sometimes would be nicer if we were super religious, I think. That would be an easier way to have a conversation.
Because you're holding on to something.
Yeah, well, it'd be an easy way to explain something, but I'm like, I don't know. Like, I don't know. And then my son said, well, I think she's in heaven with God. And then he said to me, what is God? I was like, how do you explain God to a 5-year-old? like they're really complicated conversations to navigate with small children as well. You know, for my son, he's like, well, she's in heaven. And I'm like, beautiful. And I never deviate from that because that is what gives him comfort. And that's great, you know. And so it's just, you've got to kind of find your place and how you deal with it. And it's going to be different for everyone, but it's a really difficult space to navigate.
Do you know what? My cousin died, oh gosh, it would be 20 years ago now, maybe 25 years ago. He was a pilot and he was flying. He had 6 passengers and I think hit power lines over Lake Eyre in Victoria, and plane crash. They all died and they didn't find his body for 2 years. But I remember, like, we all flew down to be with my aunt and uncle, and it was so interesting to see. So my aunt was a born-again Christian. Her husband, my uncle, was not. So he is devastated. So they were searching for the body. Yeah. They knew that it had crashed. They were searching for his body. And so my uncle's devastated. He's breaking down every day. And my aunt was just so calm. She's like, Gordon, what are you worried about? He's gone to a better place. Yeah. It was really interesting to see that.
Yeah. It is interesting because, you know, sometimes people said that to me and I was like, I'll punch you in the face. Like, like that's not making me feel comfort. Yeah. But for some people that's really comforting, and I envy it in a way because I do see how that must be a really nice state of mind to live in and really lovely. I think it's not comforting when it's not your state of mind and it just feels a bit like, oh, no, it's not a better place to be. A better place would be with me. Like, but I had this conversation with a couple of friends, like, where I said, I kind of wish I was religious, like really religious sometimes, because I see that people in grief with a lot of religion have more comfort and have an aspect of it in a different way. I actually had one of my cousins die, but unfortunately by suicide, probably about 25 years ago as well. And watching my aunt, his mother, grieve, she taught me everything what not to do. And it was a really horrific time for our family, but she became a recluse and the grief killed her in the end. Do you know what I mean? Like, it just destroyed her whole life. And I remember saying to her daughter, who flew up from Melbourne to be with me after my daughter died and to help out, because I'd done the same thing when her brother died. I'd flown down and spent time with the family. I said to her in a non-mean way, I just don't want to be like your mum. And she said, good idea. Like, do you know what I mean? But like I said, as horrible it was to watch her, and I understood why she grieved in the way she grieved and all of those things, she did fuel me to grieve in a different way, because I saw how her friendships fell away, her life fell away, her health deteriorated, all of these things, because she didn't deal with her grief properly. Because she just did not cope with it. And it's easy for that to happen. And that's why I understood from minute one that you actively have to make a decision to grieve in a healthy way. Otherwise it will eat you up.
Amen to that. Yeah. Amen to that. Yeah. Absolutely. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
God, I'd love to say retired, but I won't be. I'm a long way off.
10 marathons.
I hope I've got my 6-star. I hope I really have my 6-star medal. Yeah. I hope I've run all 6 major marathons. I actually hope that I've probably made a little bit of a career move. So I currently serve on the Lib Advocacy Board for Department of Criminal Justice. That's a 2-year appointment. I just took a role with the Serious Offenders Parole Board. So I'll be the first victim advocate on that board. That position was created by Premier Minns, and I'll be the first one to serve in that position. So I'll now serve on the Serious Offenders Board, looking at parole and helping with making decisions on what should happen. I think that in 5 years, my dental career may be changing and I might be working more in an advocacy space. So, you know, I just take opportunities and say yes and see what happens, and we'll see where it takes me.
Do you mind me asking, how old are you?
I'm about to turn 48 in March.
Okay. I only ask that because I'm now 51. So I turned 50 obviously just over a year ago. And it's so interesting hitting 50, like life just changed And it was unexpected.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's a mind shift or what it is.
Menopause. And we just feel like, God, no. We're talking about it the other day. I said to my friend, I know. I said, I think menopause is causing some problems. She goes, no, women have just had enough of men. We turn 50 and we say, no more shit.
Absolutely.
But yeah, I think that I obviously never imagined that I would actually start working in these spaces, but I am working in these spaces now. And I think for the end part of my career, it might look very different to what I thought my whole career. I've been in dental since I was 18. It's all I've ever really done. I've got varied roles in that area, working in academia. I do have a public health degree, which I think has served me quite well in my advocacy work that I have been doing. But yeah, I think that future will change. And hopefully, yeah, I've got that. I better have that 6-star medal.
Oh, you will.
Yeah, I better.
You will.
I better.
You've done some amazing things, so you absolutely will. Thank you.
Welcome.
Yeah. Thanks so much for coming and sharing your story and talking about the space and what needs to happen and what you're doing, the advocacy. Look, I know it doesn't mean that much, with what you've experienced, but you're just amazing. And thank you so much. You're an inspiration to so many. And I know it's not in the way that you probably would have thought, but thank you for the work that you've done. Like, you really are changing lives for the future. And there's something so unselfish about that. I don't know if unselfish is the right word, but you know what I mean? You said before that what you're doing can't change your situation. So the fact that you're doing it for other women and the future is that's what I meant by saying. I don't know if that's the right or wrong word.
That's what we really hope, is that we make a difference for other people, that hopefully we can prevent, but also in the aftermath that it's an easier ride for them than it was for us.
Yeah. And I do believe that somewhere Mackenzie's watching you and is so proud of you.
I hope so, yeah. And whatever that is, I hope that she knows we're working as hard as we can. That's always the goal every day, is that we're creating a life for her son that's as good as we can make it, and give him every opportunity that we can, and that we change the future for other people, because this can't keep happening. We have to have change, and that's just the reality of it.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Tabitha.
Thank you.